r/ProRevenge.
I secretly trained my roommate to not respond to his morning alarms. Reposting from a post I made in r/amith asshole. I was in college, senior. My roommate was a sophomore, but it was his first time living in a dorm. He'd been a pretty lousy roommate, constantly left the room a mess, left his stuff on my side of the room and on my bed, stole my alcohol, used my shit without permission, never clean up my dishes after he used them, and a bunch of other stuff. I confronted him about all these issues on several occasions and got the resident advisor involved with the alcohol stealing issue because at the time, he was under 21. Things still continued anyways. He asked me once if it was okay if his girl spent the night, which I said no. We were in the middle of a pandemic, plus that's especially weird if I was there. I also had to wake up every day at 8 for work, which he knew, and he would stay up until 2 a.m. playing video games some nights. Not to mention, he would set like 10 alarms in the morning with a bunch of different alarm tones. I hit a breaking point and decided to do something cruel. Every morning when I woke up, I'd observe his alarm pattern and how he'd respond. He had several alarms that he'd ignore, all with the same sound. He had a couple half-hour alarms that had a unique sound, also ignored, and then the final alarm had its own sound too. All of them were default iPhone sounds. So his brain had been trained to this alarm pattern for a while, I'd assumed. So I started step 1 of the punishment. Set up a sequence of alarms on my phone, identical to his sequence, but an hour early. He responded to my alarms the exact same way he'd respond to his own. I kept this up for a week, and his brain was eventually retrained to sleep through double the amount of alarms as before. Then, phase 2 kicked in. Random inconsistencies in my alarm pattern. Some days I'd play all the alarms, while other days I'd only play one that his brain was trained to ignore. That way, his brain expects to sleep through like 20 alarms and only ever hears 11. He slept through his alarm at least 4 times in 2 weeks. Eventually he finally changed his alarm pattern so he'd only have one alarm and he no longer had the energy to stay up until 2 a.m. TLDR. I psychologically tortured my roommate by throwing off how his brain responds to his alarm clock because he was stealing booze and was a shitty roommate.
A response to the post.
You seem like exactly the sort of guy who lives in the dorms as a senior.
Peace response to this comment.
It was an out-of-state school that I transferred into my junior year, not to mention, housing was out of budget in that area.
A response to the post.
NTA. This is a brilliant display of social Pavlov. You found a peaceful route that would force his hand based on his own actions. I think you could probably write a paper in sociology or psych based on this experience and the premise and implications of the behavior modification. Although I would recommend it being in a hypothetical with a willing participant smile.